Welcome to the MarTech podcast, a live edition here on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all of the places, all of the things. I'm your host, Benjamin Shapiro. We're changing around the MarTech podcast a little bit. We're starting to do more things like this live stream. And today, what we're going to be talking about is, well, live streams, YouTube, podcasting, all the things surrounding new media. And joining me, I've got a special guest. His name is Glenn Rubenstein. He is the founder and CEO of Adopter Media, which specializes in podcast advertising and YouTube sponsorship. Adopter Media is a leader in the industry shaping the future of audio and video endorsements and advertising, focusing on results at scale. Glenn, welcome to the MarTech podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Very excited to have you here. Excited to, well, first off, thank you for joining us in this experiment that is us starting to do our live streams. I will preface this up front. We are testing all sorts of fun things. I'm going to hit some buttons here and just see what happens. Oh my gosh, we jump all over the place. We've got our handyman here, Phil, who's going to help us figure out the right buttons to press. But if you're listening to this on LinkedIn, if you're on YouTube and you're following us, any of the channels, we do get your comments and we will react to them in real time. Let's start off. Anybody here, tell us what your role is so we know who we're talking to. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love your comments. We're going to dive deep into what's actually happening with podcast advertising, what's happening with YouTube. And this first segment that we're going to do, we're going to start with what we call our elevator pitch. So Glenn, let's start off at the beginning. I'm going to press the button. We're going to go up an elevator. We have 37 floors to go up. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do for a living. Bing.
So my name is Glenn Rubenstein. I'm the founder and CEO of Adopter Media. We are a dedicated ad agency specializing in podcast advertising and YouTube endorsements. We've been in business for 8 years now. We've placed well over $100 million in ads on behalf of our clients and are responsible for doing highly effective, highly engaged direct response ad campaigns across these very rich, very impactful mediums.
So Glenn, what I'm hearing from you, direct response advertising campaigns in podcasting and in YouTube. Now, look, I've been podcasting here for 7 years, just starting to get into this whole YouTube and new media thing. And direct response is something that we've always found to be a little bit challenging in the podcast space. I just don't understand how you're supposed to measure a podcast when people are hearing it and they're not clicking on anything. Tell me a little bit about actual direct response before I get off at my floor.
Yeah, well, it's really, really important to have multiple methods of attribution when doing any sort of advertising, especially in this medium, which is really a hybrid of offline advertising and digital. And with that in mind, you want to have your promo codes for each podcast that you sponsor, your landing pages so you can track clicks and traffic, see how that's converting. You want to have pixel attribution on the audio so you can match up the listener versus the website visitor by IP address. And then lastly, you want to have that survey at checkout, which tells you if nobody, entered a code, if they used a different device, it's your last chance for them to express themselves and pledge their allegiance to the influencer that helped them convert and make that purchase. So I think having those four methodologies really helps give you a complete picture. It's still not going to be 100%, but you're going to get an idea of what is contributing to that top of funnel brand awareness versus that direct response last click conversion. And figuring that out with this X factor, which is different for every brand, really helps triangulate the overall impact that this is having on a brand's bottom line.
Now, Glenn, as the doors open for our elevator and we're hearing a little bit about who you are and what you do, what I'm hearing is when you're thinking about podcast advertising specifically, it's about triangulation, right? Direct response is very hard to understand. So you're looking at, well, can I pixel and try to find a match? Can I give you some sort of a promo code that you use? And at the end of the day, it's a post-purchase survey, mostly if you're in B2B. How do I understand if somebody is completing my conversion? You can actually go through when you're doing your demo call and ask them, hey, what got you here?
Yeah.
So Glenn, it's good to know that you're an expert in this space, podcast advertising and YouTube, something that I'm getting more and more interested in. I want to do another little segment here, another little gimmick that we're going to call Trend or Trash. Now, for brands that are interested in leveraging influencers, new media, other people's audiences, and they're thinking about podcasting, they're thinking about YouTube, maybe even social media, tell me whether this whole notion of artificial intelligence influencing those channels, is that a trend or is that trash?
Well, I'm a big believer in AI, believe it or not. I think the technology is getting scary good if you listen to what it can do with music, what it can do with the written word, and what it can do with voice. It's really impactful, right? I think we're past the tipping point where you can't detect, is this real, a real person, or was this generated? And I think that the danger, though, is when we start talking about this business of influence and this business of endorsements. Already, some of your most popular influencers, their endorsement has gotten a little diluted. It's a little thinner because of the sheer number of deals that they're doing. I mean, look at Instagram. How many videos with, hey, everybody's asking me about my skincare routine and I want to tell you about this product. Hey, everybody's been asking me about my morning routine and I want to tell you about this product. You can over dilute your ability to sway conversions and the impact of your endorsement. And with that in mind, AI poses a danger because if this is already happening across influencers that are overly monetized, now it's taking the human element out of the equation, which is this danger that some of these larger companies and larger networks start saying, we can make a very fast set of dollars on the bottom line here if we were to take this influencer's voice and persona and then essentially, generate 1,000 different variations on these ads and just pump them out there. And I think that that's really going to get it to where the audience no longer trusts anything that listener has to say. So it's always trying to run that balance of like, what are opportunities at scale, what are opportunities to monetize and effectively maximize the profit potential of any medium or any influencer's brand. But that being said, you don't want to minimize the credibility of that influencer, because that's ultimately the business that we're all in. It's like, it's not from my point of view as an advertising agency, it's not, the content is sort of pass fail, like, and it's subjective. Even the likability of some influencers is pass fail or subjective. But what I'm really buying is that influencer, that podcast host, that YouTube host. I'm buying their relationship with their audience.
All right, can I show you one of my favorite new live stream tricks that I'm using? Because we did trend or trash, but I created a graphic for the question that you answered, which is buy or sell. When it comes down to using artificial intelligence for new media and creators, you're essentially saying, look, I'm buying it. I think that people are going to use artificial intelligence to manufacture creative on some point. I'll go back to my trend versus trash. The trend of using artificial intelligence to enhance things like podcasts, right? Quickly doing edits, using somebody's voice to clone, like using artificial intelligence to mine data, to look for subjects. I used artificial intelligence to come up with all sorts of examples of game show gimmicks, and that's how we got our buy or sell, right? Like, it basically said, hey, there's Pardon the Interruption. Why don't you take all the segments out of that and move into the MarTech podcast? That's exactly what we should be doing. But the reality is, the trash is, we're just going to replace you as an influencer or a creator, and we're just going to make a fake person that's doing this stuff. I don't think anybody wants that. And
I think some people that sell, they're in business of selling ads, would actually love that. But
I don't think the consumers. I would.
Yeah, consumers
put that one in the trash.
Yeah, but it's different in seasoning, right? It's like a little seasoning is great. Too much seasoning can ruin a dish.
Yeah. Hey, look, you can artificially, take my face and make it suitable for video. That'd be wonderful. Voice and face for radio here. That's why we didn't do live streams for a long time. But the world has changed. The cameras got better. And look, hey, here we are.
Yeah.
What I'm hearing from you is little trend, little trash.
Yeah, I think, but like anything, somebody's going to overdo it and step in it big time. And then there will be a pullback, right? We saw this with programmatic. How many people said, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. You can now buy ads and we can listen to a podcast. And if they're talking about a trip to Hawaii, the host wants to go to Hawaii. What if then the ad that we automatically insert says, here's a deal to go to Hawaii, and won't that be amazing what they'll do for audiences? And then what happened was an alcohol brand not one of our clients, placed a buy with Spotify. Spotify was like, oh yeah, we can do subjective targeting, and they ended up placing an alcohol brand on an Alcoholics Anonymous podcast. Yeah, so there's always going to be like these high profile missteps with technology, and that's what recenters people to say, okay, maybe we need some safeguards in place. Maybe we need to not go all in on this. I think as an agency, whether it's dynamically inserted ads, programmatic ads, or AI creation for ads, I think we've always been very cautious because we believe in the old school magic of this medium, which is the connection between a host and the listener. And the more we can do to do authentic, engaging ads where the host truly loves a product or service, uses it, and communicates that to their audience, that's the magic of podcast and YouTube advertising. And I think that, we've seen people try and dilute this in myriad ways to squeeze a couple extra dollars out of it and prop up this industry. But we have found that for advertisers, the advertisers do not have that demand. It's people on the sell side that see this as an ability to impact their bottom line. They're not actually trying to provide more value for anyone except themselves.
I want to move on to our next segment, which we're going to call Double Down or Diversify.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're a media buyer, right? If you're a brand marketer and you're starting to think about what roles podcasting and YouTube and let's just call it creator content or influencer content should play in your marketing mix, and you've been traditionally relying on things like SEO, PPC, cold outreach, social ads. Let's call those traditional digital advertising channels. Should you be doubling down on your existing channels now and just using artificial intelligence to make them more effective? Or should you be diversifying into different media streams like podcasting, like YouTube? Double down or diversify?
I mean, I think that if you have a product that is sticky in nature, and what I mean by that is something that when people hear about it, they're going to remember it and they're probably going to tell other people about it, right? Think about all the products, Ben, that you've bought and loved before and that you tell your friends, your family about, your colleagues about, that you're excited about. Those are the things that do best in any medium that is talkable this way. I think that there are some purchase decisions that are a little more binary that do benefit more through, search intent, that benefit more from like a really slickly produced social ad. But I think that, I'm literally in the business of word of mouth advertising. It just happens to be paid word of mouth advertising. And so I think that for any brand that thinks their product is inherently shareable and can get people excited, I mean, I think this is the best medium for that.
I think it really depends. As you said, this goes without saying, it depends on what the product is, right? And you're saying, well, if it's sticky and you can rely on word of mouth, that's great. I think of the challenge that you're trying to solve. If you have a product that requires a little bit more of a description, that is best suited showing a use case. Then things like podcast advertising, where you get 30 to 60 seconds of audio, which is more information than you're going to get from a flash. Here's the, Instagram ad, your 2 seconds that you're going to scroll through. Like that impression is going to be more valuable just sheerly by the amount of information and context that you can give. If you've got something that is a commodity product and it's just about raw tonnage of impressions and staying in front of the consumer and reminding them that they need to buy, their toothpaste or whatever it is, then things like your social media, your PPC, right? Grabbing the demand when people are looking at it, making sure that you're optimized on Amazon if you're in e-commerce, like that's the stuff that makes the most sense. It really depends on where you are, not just what type of brand, but where you are in your life cycle. Often what I've found specifically with podcast advertising is that initial like credibility and awareness. When people hear the ad and it sounds credible, you can establish that more with the new media than you would with the sort of short format, high impression type marketing activities that you'd be getting with your PPC or your social ads. So, hey, double down, diversify. Maybe it's double down, diversify, or it depends.
Well, yeah, and I think social proof of a host, of a trusted host talking about their experience with something. Oh my god, you have to almost kind of look back at the last 6 years. I mean, in the context of things, or really the last 10. But think about how many of us as of consumers who are easily excitable about new products. Think about how many of us got burned by like a Kickstarter or Indiegogo over the years of something that like never even made it to market, or we're like, oh my God, this looks so cool, but they had no business plan, no way to actually do it. So if you're an emerging DTC brand and you have actual product and you've cracked it and it's shipped and it's good, and then you have a host getting someone exciting about it and saying, "Oh no, you can order this right now. I've been using it. It's amazing. You have to try this." Like that social proof goes a long way, because I do think that when it comes to Instagram advertising or other social media where you see, I mean, I've seen this, I still see this. Someone announces a product and they're like, "Yeah, shipping in 2026." And it's like, "Yeah, I'm not like, maybe you'll get my money once this is out if people actually like it." Like I'm not pre-ordering anything, you
Shipping
know?
in 2026 is speculation. It's
Yeah.
not actually a product that you're selling.
Exactly, exactly. And so, but I think that's the problem with a lot of what you see on social media, right? Because anyone can produce a great Facebook ad. You have
Can
to have
anybody
a,
produce a great podcast ad? You're
but
talking
you
about
have
30 seconds of audio as opposed to images.
no, no. But if you're doing a host for an endorsement ad, one, you're getting minimum of 60. Most of the time, we end up getting like 2 minutes. Sometimes we get 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But like if you're advertising with Joe Rogan, you've got a minimum amount of money to do that buy-in, and you've sent him a product, he's
Yeah.
vetted it.
I'm thinking of programmatic ads where it's like,
No, and
hey,
that's yeah, and that's not the business we largely trade in, because those aren't effective. In fact, radio style ads on podcasts, maybe I shouldn't say this. Radio ad style ads on podcasts, I mean, I find particularly annoying, and I don't recommend any brand do a radio style ad where it's just a pre-produced 30-second injected in there. Like when I'm listening to a show and I love that host, I love the sound of their voice, I love their sense of humor, I love the way that they talk about something. When I hear them go into an ad, that is smooth. I'm excited to hear what they have to say about a product. I'm excited to hear about their experience. But when I hear, standard voiceover artist giving me an ad for car insurance, or telling me about, I don't know, it's always something in your area. Everyone in your area is very excited about lawn care. When I hear one of those, like I cannot hit the skip button fast enough, which is again funny for me to say, given that I work in the advertising.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I personally am for me, for my consumer taste, not to say that the ads aren't effective from a marketing perspective, but like when it's not a host read ad, it is an immediate like Apple Watch fast forward 60
Yeah.
seconds for me. And the other thing where I'm always skipping is I'm a big sports fan. So it's like if I'm listening to the Bill Simmons podcast, I'm a regular listener. I've already heard the ad 10 times. I already know Simply Safe is
Yeah.
where Bill Simmons thinks I should go to get my home alarm system, or Michelob Ultra is the beer that Michelob Ultra, maybe it's Michelob Light, maybe I don't know. But moral of the story is that the repetitive nature of the ads, if you're not cycling through them, to me, it's an instant skip. Let's move on. I want to go
Yeah.
into our next segment, which is we're going to call the secret sauce.
Sure.
You're an expert when it comes to making podcast advertising and YouTube advertising actually works for brands. And these are not just the integrations getting onto the shows. We're talking specifically about host read
Mhm.
advertising. So give me the recipe for success when it comes to cultivating growth when you're working with somebody else reading a host read ad. What are the components you need to get a host read ad to be effective for your brand?
I mean, first and foremost is making good show selection. So to walk you through our process and like what we do, first thing we do for a brand is we try and understand their demographics. Then when we want to find innovative ways to reach that demographics through a diversified test of different podcasts, all doing host reads. But if somebody tells me that their target demographic is women in their 30s and 40s, I will say, okay, we want to start looking at true crime because that over indexes there. We want to start looking at parenting because that over indexes there. We want to look at some key lifestyle news comedy podcasts that over index in that demographic, and then figure out which hosts that we've worked with before do a really good job for brands. We tend to see strong results across multiple clients. So we will then look there, figure out where there's alignments and opportunities. The brand has sign off on that. We work with the brand on copy and talking points to make sure that their messaging is in the format that's going to work best. We make sure we get the addresses together so everyone's going to have access to the product ahead of time. We do onboarding calls with every single show that we work with to make sure that they've received the product, tried the product. We answer any questions they have about the product. We make sure that they've looked at the copy and reviewed it. And then as the ads go out, we're tracking those for the client. We make sure all the pixels are set up, the landing pages, the offer codes. But then we're looking at those results and figuring out, okay, is there something we can optimize here to make future ads better based on the results we're seeing? And then from there, it's wash, rinse, repeat, double down, triple down on what's
All right,
working.
let me jump in here. The first
Yeah.
thing you're doing, you're talking about show selection, and a
Yeah.
lot of it is onboarding with the host to make
Mhm.
sure that they're going to be ready for the ad. They understand the product. They're actually communicating with some sense of authenticity.
Yeah.
When it comes to the ad read, which I'm assuming is part number two, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, no.
How do you actually get them to create a good ad?
So the key, believe it or not, is you don't want to provide a script. You want to provide talking points that leave the host room to interject their own thoughts, their own experiences, their own ideas, and really make that ad their own, because that's what's going to make it relevant to both the content and the context of that show. And I think that a lot of the magic that happens are things that could not be foreseen, that could not have been scripted. And there is nothing more disappointing from my perspective with an actual ad execution when you listen to an ad that's overly scripted and you could just tell it sounds like somebody reading. That's not what you want. You want somebody making that one-to-one connection with the listener, with the viewer. And to do that, you have to give them the breathing room to personalize this and make it their own.
So am I doing this wrong? Because when I am working on a ad read, I sit down and I write out what I want to say. Often consumers will give me the bullets,
Mhm.
right? They're, hey, here's, or they'll give me a script and then I'll rewrite it in my tone. But I actually write out what I want to say and I am reading it, but I am very clearly, word for word trying to get it right to make sure that I have something that is well thought out as opposed to shooting from the hip. Should I just be, hey, I worked on this product and here's what I think about it. And actually, now that I think about it, there's this thing that's kind of cool about it. Or should I be like, hey, check out this product. It's got A and B and C and he and here's why I love it.
I think it's always great to be able to refer to your notes. I think that's helpful. I think if there is something that needs to be tightly scripted or read verbatim, like a call to action, you could certainly specify that. But I do want to leave that breathing room, right? One, because you often end up getting a longer ad. You get an ad that feels better. You get an ad that's not rushed. I mean, imagine if you're looking at two pieces of copy and it's like, hey, read this like a script. You're just trying to power through it. The audience at that point, isn't going to have an easy time with it. It's not a comfortable listening experience. I want to provide a framework more than anything else, because what I'm buying with that connection between the host and the listener, I'm buying their ability. And I'm not, waxing poetic here, but I want them to create magic with that spot every time. And yeah, sometimes people have an off day. Sometimes people need to lean on the copy a little bit more, but the best ads are ones that have a level of unpredictability. The good thing is if we provide the right framework for a host of saying, hey, please emphasize this, but oh, by the way, per the FDA or FTC, don't say these 5 things. As long as we provide that framework, they can work within those limitations,
Yeah.
and often produce something that's wonderful and absolutely delights advertisers.
I obviously record a lot of B2B ads.
Yeah.
Host of the MarTech podcast. We do the Voices of Search podcast as well. And whenever I am doing an ad, and most of the time, actually, when I receive ads, people will try to script it out. I am making sure that I am writing it in my tone and words that I feel comfortable saying, because they have to sound good coming off the tongue. But often what people will do is be like, hey, here's the introduction. You have to say this. It describes our company and what we want you to say. Then here's a section for you to put your own story, and then make sure you read the part at the bottom. I think that's a reasonable format, which is like, hey, let me tell you about Athletic Greens. It's got, blah, 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 blah. And then I can tell them about my experience, be like, I actually do use Athletic Greens. This is not a sponsored post, but
it's a wonderful product.
I finally got the subscription. I was buying it one-off. I use it. Now I have it every day. I feel better. It keeps things moving, if you know what I mean. And now I can go back into here's how you get it and all the calls to action.
Yeah.
We get that stuff there.
It's a delicate balance, I think, sometimes to do it correctly. But kind of to your point, this is the danger also why it's like we don't recommend that advertisers over advertise. advertise on a podcast, because let's say they're running with you every episode, Athletic Greens, again, just using them as an example. You don't want to have to be like I've told you countless times before, I've been taking this and I feel wonderful. You want to make sure also, like, if you're running a lot, man, you better hope that host has a deep bench of relevant anecdotes, or gets their co-hosts involved, or gets
today I snorted Athletic Greens.
Maybe sorry, Margot. We know that's not on the talking points.
A bridge too far. Yeah. So we got, first off, you got to find the right shows. Second, you got to give the host the right thing to read and find the right format. What is the rest of the secret sauce? There's got to be a component for call to action, evaluation.
You have to have a good call to action. You have to have a good offer, right? So if you're running 20% off in your podcast promos, but you go to the website and the first thing gets a pop-up that says enter your email for 30% off, oh man, did you just set some money on fire? Like, your attribution is going to look horrible on that. So don't compete with yourself. Make sure you have a battle-tested offer that's going to work really, really well for what it is that you're selling and promoting. It's competitive. And then additionally, the feedback is also important, because, by the way, it's like, there are ads that clearly work. I can look at 2 days of performance and know that we have not captured 100% of the impact, but I can sense the trajectory and say, okay, this is going to level out. This is going to work. This is clearly not going to work. There's also in-betweeners, and with those, you need to give feedback. So look, we have an entire ad ops department. I mean, we have one side of our company that's responsible for media buying and strategy. And then we've got another, 2/3 of our company are the people that make sure the trains run on time, that do these onboarding calls, that review every ad that goes out and make sure that our clients are getting what they paid for and then some, both in terms of actual delivery of numbers and the content of the ads. And there might be something where we look at it and we say, based on these results, like, this ad did all right, but man, if they just would have, leaned a little heavier on this, or we like how they said this, like, we can give feedback, and then hopefully, if there are any issues, correct those for future reads. So I think, honestly, people have tried to make this industry turnkey. It is still a very hands-on industry. And I think that one thing we have learned over the years is this industry has gotten smarter, as advertisers have gotten smarter, is we have learned that, like, you have to, I think part of the reason our agency is so popular, you really have to have infrastructure to do this right with any level of scale.
For everybody that's watching at home, apologies for letting my fingers do the walking. I accidentally pressed the one button, which is the just view my face. Again, it's a live stream. We're figuring things out, new on the MarTech podcast. If you are watching this, we'd love to hear if you have any questions about podcast advertising, about YouTube advertising. We're going to read some of the comments at the end when we get them. By all means, please go ahead. And if you're on YouTube, like and subscribe, all of the good things. Here's my takeaway, is that when you're thinking about podcast advertising, when you're thinking about working with influencers in an ad format, finding the right person is what really matters, right? If you can find someone that actually has an authentic connection to your brand, even better, right? If you're trying to get someone to promote your product and they don't actually believe in your product, guess what? Your consumers can understand that. They can hear it, they can see it, they can feel it. So try to find people that have good experiences with your brand when you're thinking about how to do promotion. And if they don't, and you're trying to get access to an audience that is a big, important audience, build that relationship, give them a trial, work with the influencers to not just get them to read the ads, but onboard them, to educate them, work with them so they can help provide value. All right, we're going to jump into the second section. We were talking about not only artificial intelligence in podcast advertising, we're going to move into what brands are really looking for when it comes to podcast advertising. So, Glenn, let's talk a little bit about what actually works in podcasting. I'm going to start off with a little exercise we call role play. And I actually have a little gimmick here. Are you ready? I spent all night last night making this. Woo! Role play. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything that makes you feel too uncomfortable. All I want you to do is pretend to be the person that runs a brand. You're thinking about getting into podcast advertising like a lot of the people that are listening to this live stream, watching this on LinkedIn and YouTube. Maybe they're listening to the podcast and they're not sure exactly what they should be looking for, How do I figure out what makes a good podcast for my brands? What are brands looking for now that you're the brand manager when it comes to finding a good podcast?
For a brand, I think the most important thing when looking at this medium is figuring out what is going to produce results that are measurable, impactful, and can really be felt and are demonstrable, right? There's a lot of advertising out there that is digital first. And I know that if I spend money on Facebook, on AdWords, on any sort of social media where it's pay per click, pay per impression, I know that that's very binary. I can see how it's working, how it's converting. So if I'm going to do something that's a little more offline, that's a little more endorser, influencer based, and isn't just based on that pay per click model, I want to know how am I going to be able to measure this? How am I going to be able to go to my boss and say this is driving results, this is driving awareness? So I really want to see that there's going to be last click conversion tracking through URLs and offer codes. I really want to see there's going to be pixel tracking that's going to tell me like this is who's hearing me, this is who's going to the website, this is who's converting. And I want to know with the survey where I could say that okay, with all these other directly measurable results, how can I get a sense of what this is actually doing to build our brand through direct response ads? Like that's the challenge, because with pure digital, it's not easy to execute, but it's easy to see what's working and what's not. So I really just want to know that if I'm going to take this leap of faith and make these larger connections for these larger endorser and influencer deals, how am I going to be able to measure this in a way where I can clearly show that for every dollar spent, we're getting X dollars of ROI?
So you're coming at this from the advertiser perspective, and you're looking at this saying, look, you got to be able to measure, because if you can't measure, you don't know. And then you're just, sniffing the hopium.
Yeah, nobody wants that old adage of 50% of my marketing budget is working. I'm just not sure which half.
And the truth is that's still true. And it's even more true. It's probably 75 to 100% true when you talk about podcasting. And look, I have been podcasting for 7 years. It has fundamentally changed my career, right? I was an independent marketing consultant. I started a podcast. The podcast got bigger. I started selling sponsorships. People started asking me to create podcasts for them.
Yeah.
And now I'm coming at this from the production perspective. And here is my dirty little secret when it comes to production. Are you ready? Audio podcasts alone don't work. Asterisks, hang on. They do work, but you have to have time. You have to have patience. You have to have the right content, right? But if you're just thinking that you're going to do an audio podcast and all of a sudden that is going to materially change your brand, you're smoking crack. It doesn't happen that quickly. An audio podcast alone is not enough. And it's one of the reasons why we started doing things like this, where, hey, look at us. We're here together. Wrong button. I can't get the buttons right, but this is meant to be the answer, right?
Well, by and large, yes. And for advertising, but let me tell you what killed it, though, a lot from an advertising perspective, was actually dynamic and digitally inserted ads. Because what happened with audio is a lot of the same. I mean, we're a little late in the podcast here, so I'm going to start dropping some truth, some stuff that maybe, this is going a little deep, but let me keep it real with the audience here. A lot of the same people that ruined radio made a concerted effort to take over podcasting about 7 years ago. And a lot of those same things that ruined radio with like too many ads, overdoing it, in terms of ad loads, like doing shorter ads, trying to get in more of the auto insurance companies, localized advertising. Like they tried to stage this takeover of audio, of digital audio, about 7 years ago. And thank God they largely have failed at doing this. And part of what they tried to do was doing these programmatic ads, these digitally inserted ads, saying, oh yeah, host-read ads are great, but we can make more money if we just open this up to a programmatic marketplace. People do pre-produced audio, and that's going to work, right? Like listeners are going to love that. And it turned out they did not, in fact, love that. So
everybody's going to be listening to a podcast and they're going to love with somebody else's voice pops on there and starts talking to them about car insurance. Who wouldn't love that? It's great, mostly when it's not a clear ad break.
So every podcast, coincidentally, that was not a part of one of these networks also was publishing on YouTube and was doing video and audio. And so as an agency, we could talk about this now because we're at the other end of this, but I will tell you that for years, our secret was that whenever possible, we bought exclusively podcasts that were both on YouTube and on audio, because what that meant was that all that terrible ad injection technology didn't affect those shows, because they would upload to YouTube one version of the podcast that had the ads set in it, all done by the host. That's what they would publish for the audio. And we found like, aha, this is we're bulletproof now. We don't have to deal with worrying about these ads being stuffed and whatnot there. So I will tell you, there are some audio podcasts that are good, that are worth advertising on. But yes, the vast majority of what we do is video and audio.
It's not that audio isn't worth advertising in. My point is, mostly from an advertising perspective, I think that the direct response tracking and attribution is a challenge. From production, if I'm an in-house B2B brand and I'm thinking about what to create, an audio podcast alone can be impactful to get people to listen to you, to understand you, to get knowledge from you, to think about you as a thought leader. And then at the end of the 6 months, a year, 2 years that you've been doing this product, you're like, great, did this have a business impact? And nobody knows. They might think they know, but there's no real way to track it other than content consumption. But on the flip side, what people do understand is the impact of social media, right? The comments that are coming into this live stream, right? We're going to be able to understand who they are. You can follow up with those people. There is more of a communication flywheel as opposed to it be broadcasting from one to many and getting nothing back. And to me, I'm trying to be a little bit controversial here, but that's why I'm like, hey, audio podcasts, they don't work. It's my new hill to die on. Audio podcasts are wonderful for credibility, for depth of message, for consistency, for frequency, but not for conversation. That's not what they're for, and that's why things like YouTube, like why we're doing the live stream, like why we want to have chunked up social media clips everywhere. It's like those are the things that actually get more engagement that then you could follow up with, and then you have some sort of tangible tracking to say, well, the content we created is actually leading to a net positive result in our business.
And the pandemic changed a lot, as far as it's not just about, oh, I want to listen to this on my commute anymore. A lot of people started realizing, hey, you know what? Like, I can watch long form discussions on YouTube. That was not so much of a thing 5 years ago. YouTube was more shorter form content, and that still exists. It's very healthy on YouTube. I consume a ton of it, but I think this idea of how we consume things really changed, and it wasn't just all about on the go anymore.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Look, I want to move on and go to our segment called The Crystal Ball. Sure. I want you to look into your crystal ball now that you've been doing podcast advertising for years, and talk to me about what you see for the medium. Do you think audio podcasts specifically are going to continue to live and thrive from an advertising perspective? Are we getting more ad budget, less ad budget? What do you see when you look at the crystal ball and you're looking 5 years ahead for audio only podcasts?
So it's very interesting, because if you look at 5 years ago, we were in what a lot of people refer to as a dumb money phase of podcasts, which isn't to say that there weren't smart advertisers buying, but that every brand was looking at this as an experiment and just tossing cash at it without even having clear expectations.
It was a wonderful time to be a podcaster.
It was good, but I'll tell you, you know, I feel that our specialty, we're making more as an agency now, working exclusively with smart money brands that know what they want, that have clear goals, and we know how to deliver on those goals. And by the way, like, that's more predictable revenue. That's more dependable revenue. So I think for the industry and the people that do advertising well, like, revenue right now is a lot more rock solid if you're good and if you have advertisers that want to work with you. So looking ahead at 5 years, I think 5 years from now, right now, will be in another smart money phase, but I do think we are on the precipice of another experimental phase where we're going to see a lot of brands coming in and trying to figure it out again, but that always shakes out, right? Because the unfortunate thing is, when you've got that insane brand demand and limited supply of quality opportunities, that messes with price. It shakes out some of the smart money brands where it's not so smart for them anymore to keep spending if the prices keep driven up by all these people that just want to spend. So I think that there's always going to be a bit of growth and a bit of contraction, but the key is, as long as you have those authentic relationships between the listener and the host, like, this industry is going to be in great shape. The problem is that, again, we have to fight off people that just want to listen to their worst instincts about how to over monetize this space. So I
Yeah.
think for us, that's the constant battle.
Yeah, I hear you. My concern, it's your crystal ball, but
Yeah,
may I take a view,
please.
is that the old school radio heads, that's not a bad band reference, I promise.
Yeah.
The old school people that were in radio that are like, I know what we could do. We can cram more
Yeah,
ads into
30 ads
short
a
form
show.
content and really make the user experience worse.
Yeah.
My hope is that they don't win, and
Yeah.
my feeling is that that trend will continue. I also think that the technology will get better. I think that there will be enhancements in technology, not just in terms of like how do you take an IP and figure out who it is, but I think that the platforms will get better in terms of adding things like communication, allowing to the guest and host to have better experiences interacting together
Yeah.
with the audience, just kind of like what we're trying to do here, where we can accept comments. Everybody, if you're listening, raise your hand, tell us where you're from, shout out to us. We'd love to have the conversation with you as well. But I do think that there's also going to be a wave where people are going to realize that audio podcasts and the sort of sexiness phase of podcasts,
Yeah.
they kind of become table stakes in the same way that blogging does, where you have to have a podcast, you have to be in the medium, but you also have to do all of the other things. It's one of the reasons why we believe that this notion of media brands is going to come on the rise, where a podcast is a facilitator for all of this other type and formats of content. I know that you got to run. I know that we have 3 minutes until your next meeting. Let's do our shout outs and call outs. Tell us a little bit about who you're trying to reach, who you want to mention, anybody that deserves a little attention or notice.
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I am wowed each and every day by what our team at Adopter Media does. I think too many to name individually right now, but they are just doing an incredible job, both on the buy side, the biz side, the marketing side, and especially the ad op side, that does all the heavy lifting for our 20 plus clients and make sure that all of their dollars get executed effectively in this space. Of course, we love all of our network partners that we've been working with. And I think there's a lot of them that are doing just a really excellent job right now beyond just the obvious ones. And I would recommend anyone looking at the space, if you want to do it on their own, that would be my main recommendation, is go a little deeper, just beyond, the first results that pop up when you look at some of these companies and their offerings. And look, man, I appreciate you for having me today. I love the chance to get to talk about this. I think this medium it might not be at its biggest dollar wise, but I think it's the healthiest it's ever been, because we've really recentered on what works, on what's effective. And I think that as long as we do right by the brands that are investing in this space, they'll continue to put money in it. And ultimately that does right by all of us.
All right, here's time for the big finish. Thank you, everybody, for listening and watching this live stream. We've got it on YouTube. We've got it on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, maybe even Instagram if we press the right buttons. I appreciate you all paying attention. If you are listening to this on the podcast, thank you for listening. We're going to publish an episode every day on the podcast. We're going to do these live streams relatively frequently moving forward in all of the channels. If you have any comments, not only will we get to them now, I think that Glenn's got to take off, but we will follow up and write back to you on any of the social media channels. We do monitor the comments and comment back. So thank you all for listening. Here's my big takeaway. If you're thinking about podcasting, the advertising medium is there. It is growing, but it's all about building the relationship with the guest, with the host, with the people who are producing the content. If they don't know about you and your brand and don't have an authentic experience, it's going to be hard for them to communicate that authentically. So you have to have that relationships. And if you're trying to do it at scale, that's where brands like Adopter Media come in. They help you navigate the wealth of opportunities that are out there within the podcasting landscape. Thanks again to Glenn Rubenstein for joining us. And until next time, my advice is to focus on keeping your customers happy.